I'm Sharon Spurlock, Senior Director of Family Support at the St. Louis Arc, and we are here to talk to you about one of our signature services today, our Arch Respite Program. And I hope a lot of you that are listening are getting those services. If you're not, let's see if we can figure out how to bring you on board. It's a great opportunity for families to take a short break while their kids of any age get support. So without further ado, let me introduce Ann Mangelsdorf, the Assistant Director of Family Support and Advocacy. And Ann, tell us a little bit about respite. What is respite?
Well, I like to think of respite as a variety of things, but mostly I looked it up, I Googled it. I just wanted to see what would pop up if I Googled respite. And there were quite a few things that came up, but the thing I liked best was it had just brief words. So, what is respite? Respite is rest, a break, intermission, interlude, and my favorite, breathing space. So that was one of the definitions that
Ooh.
came up. Basically, respite care is an opportunity to get a brief break from ongoing caring for someone. And it can be anyone, but typically for our program, it's someone with an intellectual or developmental disability. And not only does that individual get care while family members and other caregivers get a break, but that individual gets a break from family as well. So everyone gets a break from each other, which is great.
I think during the last, almost 2 years now, it seems like it's been an eternity. Everybody has learned a lot about the need for some me time and some quiet space and self-care, but it's also been particularly challenging. How do you encourage families to take advantage of respite?
So, one thing that families are somewhat reticent to do is they're very all of us have our bubble, and our bubble is fairly small. Some people have a bigger bubble, some people have a smaller bubble, but sometimes that bubble does not include a respite provider because that respite provider maybe hasn't been vaccinated or isn't willing to mask or whatever the situation is. And so families have been using or relying more on other family or extended family to do their care. So the other thing is families are not going out as much. So if a family is not going out and they still want to get some respite care, there's nothing wrong with being in another part of the house and taking a little cat nap or just going out in the yard and doing some yard work without any interruptions, and then having that individual with a respite provider of some type. So care while you're at home can still provide the break that you need.
That's really great. I'm going to come back to that because I know we've had some people be very creative during this kind of at-home time, and our funding sources, who I'll just give a shout out to now, two of our Senate Bill 40 boards, the Office for DD Resources and the Productive Living Board of St. Louis County. They've been incredibly flexible with us so that families can get respite in the way that works best for them right now. So I'm going to ask about that in a minute, but let's talk. Our very first question that came in was about what kind of insurance do I need to use respite? So let's talk about eligibility, Ann.
Great. So, in order to be eligible for our particular program, insurance is not a requirement, which is really nice. So, the way that the program is paid for is through one of those funding sources that Sharon just talked about, either through St. Louis City's Developmental Disabilities Resources or the Productive Living Board of St. Louis County. So that funding is actually a result of property tax dollars that are assessed on each individual's personal property. And then a portion of that is used to pay for your respite services. So for many of you who do have to pay personal property tax, some of it's coming back to you. So that makes it real nice. So insurance is not a needed resource. What is needed is to live in one of those two areas, St. Louis City or St. Louis County, and have a family member with an intellectual or developmental disability. Now, outside of the St. Louis Arc, there are other respite programs in other counties. So for families who are looking for those resources, you can reach out to me, Ann Mangelsdorf at the St. Louis Arc, and I'm happy to direct you to other resources within the other counties and around Missouri.
Okay, so I've got to be eligible for funding through those two funding sources. So I have to meet their diagnostic criteria. What about age and family income and all those other kinds of things that often play a role in whether I can get services?
So this is another really nice thing about the respite program is it does not include family income. And our feeling is that families are having to pay for all types of services and therapies and out-of-pocket expenses. And the last thing that they need to have to pay additional fees for would be getting a break. So to the best of our ability, we try to cover some of those costs. I think the other thing to note is if you do live in St. Louis County, you can be of any age and receive respite services. So we have people that are little bitty babies, and we have people in their 80s who are getting respite care. So a little bit of everything. And then in St. Louis City, you have to be at least 3 years of age or older, but again, any age after 3, and you do have to have a St. Louis Regional Center case manager or an open case with a resource specialist. So basically, you do have to have an open case at the St. Louis Regional Center. If that's something that you don't have right now, and that's something you need assistance with in getting that so that you can access respite and other services, you again can reach out to me.
So you've got a couple different things about eligibility. If you're in St. Louis City, you have to have a family member who's at least 3, and you have to have a regional case manager. So let's walk through the intake process. And if I realize that I think I'm eligible for these services, I contact you. And then what happens?
Then I will contact you. I will call you on the phone and talk with you about the program in further detail and explain how it all works. I will send you a respite application that can be sent to you via email or mail. You then complete that application and return it to me. If you live in St. Louis City, I can get your diagnostic information for your family member directly from the St. Louis Regional Office. And if you live in St. Louis County, you can also get that information through the St. Louis Regional Office if you have a case there, or from your doctor. Or a lot of times people have records at home that they've had for a long time. So if your son or daughter or brother or sister has Down syndrome, for instance, you already may have something with that information on it. So we will help you get that information one way or another. Once we have all of that information together, then we send you another packet. That is called our intake packet. Pre-COVID, we would do that in person. Now we are doing it via phone or Zoom. And so I have my packet in my area, you have your packet in your area, and we walk through it together. I answer any questions you have about the program further. And then at that time, we decide how many hours your family is going to receive in terms of respite hours. So because respite is a brief rest period for families, it's not really meant to be used every single day of the month. So making sure that you've got some hours so that you can get those breaks, but there aren't a lot of hours. So families can receive anywhere from 50 hours a year up to a maximum of 504 hours per year. And that is based specifically on the needs of the individual, the types of support needs they have, as well as the needs of the family as well. So we look at all kinds of situations that families are struggling with or that they're coping with. And those could be things like caring for older parents along with a child with a disability. It could be expecting a new baby. It could be moving. A lot of different kinds of situations come up in households where you might need more care in certain times of your life than at others. So your hours go up and down year to year based on what you might need for that current year.
And I just want to let people know, Anne does such a great job, Anne and Lori and all of the staff that work in this program. I don't know that everybody realizes that we have over 1,600 families registered to get respite services, and 1,356 families, even during COVID last year, utilized the service. So figuring out how to do allocations in a fair way, listening to individual stories, because we don't just allocate and walk away. We have people that call us during the year and say, something's come up, I need some hours. And we continue to support families to try and make sure that we're providing resources for them, either through respite or maybe by helping them look at some alternatives to respite to kind of build their support system up. So there's all those things that Anne does with a million phone calls every week. And I just can't tell you, Anne, how important that is to me and to all the families here at the Art. So I want to add, now that I've said that, that we do send you a lot of paper, but a lot of it is like that giant HIPAA thing that you have to sign. So it's not a huge amount of stuff to fill out. The main part that requires time to fill out is your needs assessment. We want you to be thinking about the things that you need to report to us about why you need respite. So we're going to ask you some questions to kind of get you ready for that respite interview. So you've determined my eligibility and you've got my needs assessment, and now you've authorized hours for me, which is really exciting. Now I need to use my Arch services, Anne. So do I call you to get somebody to come to my house?
Very good question. So, yeah, you could. It's going to be very difficult for me to fulfill your request, but you can certainly do that. There are several ways. One is in St. Louis County, families can use anyone who is 16 or older that doesn't live in their home with them and isn't the parent or the step parent. So that does mean that extended family, neighbors, friends, other professionals that may know your family member. We've had people who went to their adult day program, but sometimes on the weekends, family wanted to have a break, and they were actually able to use one of the staff at the adult day program who just happened to have a real affinity for him. Other times you can find camp counselors and other people that have worked with your family in the past that might be willing to do that care. So we have tip sheets, and we have a couple of websites. We have a university job board that you can use to try to locate people to help you. The other thing that we do have is a small list of about 20 individuals who provide respite on their own time. So these are people with varying degrees of experience. Some have practical experience. Maybe they grew up with a brother or sister or family member with a disability. Some have had formal training, but maybe not as much experience. So you've got a little bit of everything going there. And then it talks about their availability, how to reach them, and things like that. So that list is available to families. But I tell them it's not a magic bullet. I find that the tip sheet is the more valuable piece because it can really give you ideas for how to expand your thought processes in trying to find people on your own.
Okay, I want to know your favorite tip on the tip sheet then, Anne.
My favorite tip is how to wean the respite provider into your life. So It's basically that apprehension about having someone in your home that you may not know very well, and how do you screen for them? So, one of the things I like to tell people is to start with that phone interview. Then, if they make it through the phone interview, then you do a face to face, either at your home or at a restaurant or a McDonald's or something. Um, it would be nice if you could have your family member there as part of that process just to see how interactions go. And then if all goes well and you decide to try this person out, then I would try them out while you're home. I'd have them do an activity or something with your family member while you're in another part of the house. Maybe you're making dinner. Maybe you're just watching a little television or interacting with another family member. And then if that goes well, then you leave for a little while. And you're going to come back at 8, but you really come back at 7:30. And you say, "Oh, we got done early." So then you kind of see how things went while you were gone. So that's usually the process that I take families through in terms of trying to try out a provider.
That is such a great tip. No wonder it's your favorite. I do think people are get really nervous about who to let into their home and
Mhm.
how to protect for that. We do on our list of providers ask them about their experience and also if they've had a police check or a family care registry check so that families can use that. But I do want to say that it's difficult for some families that we don't provide the person to come into your home. But with as many families as we have in the program, we would be constantly short staffed, and it would be very difficult to match that many respite providers with families to make sure that we were doing the best possible job. So I think it's great that families have a chance to kind of pick the person that feels right to them, whether it's somebody that lives near them or is family or just has a great relationship with their family member with a disability. So I hire somebody, they come in and work for me. How much can I pay them?
Oh, that's a good question. So, our program reimburses families at $8.16 an hour, which we realize is not minimum wage, and it's also not designed to pay the entire cost of care. So, I will say that care is going to vary depending on the needs of your family member and how you're going to use your respite. But I would expect that families are going to pay anywhere from $10 an hour on up, depending on what they're using. We have families that are paying as much as $20 an hour for their respite, but somewhere between 10 and 15 seems to be the going rate.
Okay, so I'm going to pay the person that comes into my house, and then I submit paperwork to you to get reimbursed at $8.16 an hour, right?
Correct.
Okay. So if I don't want to go through a voucher program and hire my own person, what are my other options?
So there are organizations throughout the St. Louis area that do provide providers, and then they match that provider to the family. The providers go through a training process, and those two programs are Great Circle, which serves kiddos from about age 5 to 19, and then Easter Seals Midwest, which serves individuals of all ages with autism. And then there are a couple of facility based programs in the St. Louis area. One is for people who are 18 and older, and that is through United Cerebral Palsy Heartland. And then there is a very small home that Great Circle runs, again, for school agers just on the weekends. And I believe there's 3 beds, so it's a really small program. And then if you're looking outside the St. Louis area, Jefferson County has a respite program and St. Charles County has a respite program. And each of those vary. So the Jefferson County program is more of a voucher program similar to ours. And the St. Charles program has a combination. They have a facility-based program, a drop-in program, and then a voucher program that's like ours.
Excellent. So if I want to use the facility-based program or get on the list to get services from the Easter Seals program, can I still get voucher program from the ARC?
Yes, so you can use multiple respite programs for your services. And what the trick is that you have a maximum of 504 hours total that you can use with all the programs combined. So you can't go over that 504-hour limit that the Senate Bill 40 boards have put into place, the funders. So if you use half of it with Easter Seals and half of it with ARC, you can do that. It just depends on how you want to split up your hours and use them.
All right. So if you have any logistical questions about respite, or if you want to sign up for respite, talk to Ann. I'm going to now dig into the things I want to talk about related to respite. So Ann,
Yes.
one of the things that you know is a pet peeve for me is when families get authorized respite hours, but then they don't use any, and they say they're saving their respite for a rainy day. They just want to be in the program, so if something happens, they've got hours. And what is it about that you think is faulty logic?
All right. So the faulty logic there is you don't want to wait until an emergency. If you wait until an emergency, who are you going to use? And most people don't have anyone because they haven't used it. So they don't have any backup. They don't have a way. And so when I talk with families, oftentimes I'll ask them, well, what will you do if you have an emergency? And they say, well, I'll call you. Well, I'm not going to provide your respite care for you. So I don't think that's a bad answer. So a good answer would be I've made a plan. These are the 3 people that have agreed to do my care for me if something should happen and I have to be rushed to the hospital in the middle of the night. If you have that set up and you have your respite hours, great. But if it's just, well, I've got them just in case, but you have no plan, that is not a good scenario, because the other thing that's going to happen is that person's going to be under stress. Your family is going to be stressed out, and then this person who they may or may not be familiar with is going to come in on an emergency basis, and it's just not going to be good. So I
Well, and
think
that's
that
what I was going to
plan,
say. If that person isn't regularly interacting with them, that plan to me only works if your provider is Aunt Susan and she's hanging out with you guys once a week anyway. So she really knows the person's routines and she knows their communication style and all that kind of stuff. So use your respite. There's no reason not to use it. Just kind of build a pattern so that your family member gets comfortable with somebody else. The other thing I love to talk about on the positive end, I'm not going to be a Debbie Downer now, is families that have been super creative about how to use their respite. And one of my favorite techniques is when a family uses a respite provider to provide a support for their family member that is really goal oriented. So we've had people use a respite provider to help a person volunteer somewhere in the community. So they can go out and get volunteer experience with somebody that they're comfortable with while mom and dad get a break, which what a great double use of some funding. And do you have any creative uses of respites that you like to share with families?
absolutely. So families will use it as if you have let's say you have multiple children, you might just need an extra pair of hands to go with you to the amusement park or to the nearby restaurant. You might use it as a way to work on social skills, so that respite provider can take your family member out into the community and teach them how to order, how to pay for their meal, maybe how to do the grocery shopping, whatever you might want that person to work on. The nice thing about respite is it's a great prep tool for what's going to come next. So whatever that next is for your family member, whether they're, school ager or whether they're a grown-up adult, there's going to be a next, whatever that is. And so just preparing for those things so you're not always the one doing it.
Yeah. And one of my favorite COVID creative activities was families that had an Aunt Linda in New Jersey who had a relationship with the person and they were willing to engage with them on FaceTime or one of the apps where they could be on the computer together. And we were so lucky because our funders said, that's great. As long as mom and dad get a break, we'll accept that as paid respite. So I thought that was really cool. My question is that there was some legislation that came up last year about Senate Bill 40 boards and taxes, and it really caught me off guard. And I wondered if you could tell our families a little bit about that legislative initiative.
Yes, I will because it's going to come back. So there is a legislator in Missouri at the state level who would like to eliminate personal property taxes. And on the one hand, for me, that sounds great. I would love to not have a personal property tax at the end of the year. On the other hand, it pays for this service, it pays for employment services, it pays for residential care for some families, it pays for all types of supports and services that families get, including respite care across the state. So each of the counties would no longer have that money, and it would be devastating for services around St. Louis and across the state. So we're going to keep you
Yeah,
posted
so
on that.
families, if you are getting funding from your county board, or if you're hoping to get access to funding, make sure your legislator understands how those dollars are being used, how they're being managed, because it does sound on the surface like a great idea and everybody's going to love not having to pay taxes, but it would be very devastating for our community. So, and there's term limits. So your legislator may not really understand what your benefit is from those tax dollars. So this could be a really easy way to pick up the phone and say, hey, I just want to tell you a little bit about my family.
I just would like to say that I think of all the programs and services that you can leverage, respite is one of the most versatile, the easiest to get, and it will provide you with all types of supports that you may need to move your family member forward to the next level, the next step, whatever that might be. And so I encourage people to use it. And if you haven't used it because you feel guilty or you're undeserving or you're just waiting for that emergency, I'm going to encourage you to try to use it. And if you don't know what to do, call me.
Perfect. All right. Well, that was a wonderful way to end. Thank you, Anne. It's always fun to talk to you, and I'm with you. I think the first go-to I have for families is let me tell you about our Arch program because it's pretty easy to get into it. I don't believe we talked about this, but I don't think there's a waiting list right now because it's the beginning of the fiscal year. So don't wait. Contact Anne, get signed up if you aren't already, and come back for our next Q&A. Thanks. Have a great day.
Thanks, Sharon.